When I was a kid, adults told me a story about work. They said, if you study hard, if you get a good job, if you stay loyal and you work hard, you'll be safe. You'll be respected. You'll be free. And I remember thinking that all of this sounded very comforting. It gave structure to a world that felt overwhelming. But here's the thing, that story was just a lie. Maybe the biggest lie ever told about work. And it actually took me decades and a lot of pain to finally see it. I believed in it at first. I forced myself to believe it because, well, let's face it, what was the alternative? That life is just chaos, that none of us are safe. But the longer I worked, the clearer it became. The promise of work, it wasn't real. It was a fairy tale that kept us obedient. So what exactly is the biggest lie about work? It's this: if you work hard, the system will reward you. That's the hook. That's the line that parents tell their kids, that teachers drill into students and managers whisper to keep you compliant. That's the lie that keeps billions of people grinding their entire lives. But reality, it keeps proving the opposite. So, for example, take the company Intel. In 2025, this year, Intel announced that it would lay off 24,000 employees. That's about 15% of its entire workforce. Not because it was collapsing or not because it had no more money left, but because it was restructuring and, canceling massive projects in Europe. Intel still reported billions in revenue, yet tens of thousands of workers, some with decades of loyalty, were suddenly disposable. This is the truth about jobs. Security was never the deal, and I've seen this up close. I never forget the days when I've seen huge layoffs at works at some of my old jobs. People just sat frozen at their desks, staring at the email that told them that their time was up. A few actually cried, and others just walked straight up without saying a word. And then HR would roll out a cake, an actual cake, to thank the people who were leaving. It was a very hollow gesture, sweet frosting on bitter reality. We were literally celebrating the end of people's livelihoods. And this was the day when I stopped believing the story. And I also remember this one time when I worked as a receptionist. I used to watch this coworker of mine who had been there for something like 20 years. 20 years of showing up on time, never missing a shift, always doing what was asked. He should have been respected. Instead, he was invisible. And when he was passed over for promotion, yet again, he sort of shrugged and laughed bitterly, like he already knew the game was rigged. And later, when I was working in this IT department, I met a colleague who had been at the company for more than a decade. A brilliant guy, knew the systems inside and out. But every time he applied for advancement, someone else was chosen. Usually someone younger, shinier, better at schmoozing with the management. He confided in me this one day that I'm too old to start over. I'm too tired to keep pretending. So I'm just gonna stay here until they fire me. And that's sort of when I realized that the system, it doesn't actually reward loyalty. It feeds on it. And the story we're told is seductive. It says that if you sacrifice your weekends, if you stay late, if you push yourself harder, someone will notice. Someone will reward you. But that day rarely comes. And the moment profits dip, or strategies change, or a new executive decides to cut costs, suddenly you're not family, you're not valued, you're just a line item, a number to be deleted. And if you think about it, promotions, they don't go to the hardest workers. They go to the most political, the most visible, the ones who know how to play the game. And I've seen brilliant colleagues burn themselves out chasing the promise, while some less competent but better connected moved up instead. You see, the hours you grind, they don't buy security. They buy the company a bigger margin. They buy the CEO another bonus. They buy the shareholders new yachts. But when they're done with you, they will let you go with a pat on the back and maybe, if you're lucky, a slice of the cake. You know, the worst part of all of this is that it isn't new. Wage slavery has been a part of human history for a really long time. Now, if you think about the pyramids, keep mentioning those damn pyramids, generations of workers spent their lives hauling stone, breaking their bodies to build these monuments for someone else's glory. And we still admire those monuments today, but we rarely think of the millions of lives that were swallowed up to create them. And we're still doing the same thing now. Only today, the pyramids aren't made of stone. They're made of corporate profits, brand empires, stockholder dividends. The faces of the workers change, but the purpose stays the same. Sacrifice your time and your body to build something you will never own. In the Middle Ages, peasants actually worked less than we do today. Now, it sounds impossible, but it's true. Peasants actually did work less than us today. Sure, life was hard, food was scarce, and winters were brutal, but the rhythm of work was seasonal. It wasn't endless. Crops needed planting, then came long pauses. Harvest brought a rush, then came rest. By some estimates, peasants had 80 to 100 days off every year. That's more vacation than most of us could ever dreamed of. Now, Sundays were sacred. Festivals stretched out for days. Life wasn't easy, but it wasn't a constant grind. Now, if you compare that to us today, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year for 40 years, and if you're lucky, maybe 2 weeks of vacation. The medieval peasant, dirt on his hands, sunburn on his face, might have lived with less comfort, but in terms of time, that man was richer. And then came the Industrial Revolution, which I've made a lot of videos about. Work shifted from land to factory, from rhythm to schedule, from seasons to shifts. And suddenly, time itself was owned. Bells, clocks, whistles. Your body wasn't enough. They wanted your hours, your attention, your obedience. This was the birth of modern wage slavery. Productivity became the measure of human worth. And the 8-hour day, we treated like some sort of sacred balance. But like I've said so many times in my videos, it wasn't designed for fairness. Henry Ford didn't introduce it out of kindness. He introduced it because research showed that productivity dropped after 8 hours. That's it. If humans were most efficient at 12 hours, we would be working 12 today. The system was never about our well-being. It was about efficiency, about output, about profit. World War II and the years that followed offered a different kind of illusion. Oh, and by the way, Henry Ford, he was actually a Nazi fan, just so you know. So it's kind of weird that we still listen to his instructions about how long a work week should be. Anyway, I get off track here. The post-war boom promised something new. Stable jobs, pensions, a single income that could support a family, even a mortgage in the suburbs. This was the era of the so-called American dream. People believed in it because, for a while, it seemed to work. Factories roared, wages rose, unions had actual power. But even that was just temporary. By the 1970s and the 80s, that dream was dismantled piece by piece. It was globalization, it was the rise of shareholder economy, pensions were gutted, jobs were outsourced, unions were weakened, and stability gave way for something else. When people tell me this is just how it is, I'm like, no, it isn't. It was designed this way, and it wasn't designed for you. We've swapped plows for keyboards, barns for boardrooms, bells for Outlook notifications. But the deal remains pretty much the same. Your life in exchange for someone else's monument. Okay, look, I don't need history books to tell me the truth. I lived it. I remember my first office job, I thought I would feel proud, steady paycheck, seat at the desk. Instead, I felt hollow, meetings stacked up like bricks in a wall I couldn't climb. Spreadsheets swallowed my hours, rows of numbers nobody would even remember by Friday. My brain felt like it was leaking, drained into cubicle walls. And during my lunch breaks, I would escape outside just to breathe, just to see the sky, to remind myself that the world existed beyond the fluorescent lights. And when I got home, I was too void to do anything meaningful. Even picking up a book felt like too much. And weekends, they weren't rest, they were recovery marathons. 2 days to numb out before Monday came again. And then came the collapse, depression. In my final year at the university, writing my thesis, I woke up one morning with zero will to go on. No drama, I just empty. And it took therapy, medication, long nights talking to a therapist to crawl back. And it took me years to realize why. You see, my purpose sort of evaporated. I chased a degree, believing that this was the path. And once I had it, everything after felt hollow. No vision, no dream, just the looming script of wage slavery. And I met colleagues trapped by mortgages, and they stayed in jobs they hated out of debt. They traded freedom for a roof and a bank's timeline. I've seen that look so many times, just shoulders stooped, eyes glazed, living not for themselves, but for a mortgage company, man. I talk about the fact that I buy lottery tickets every week, and it's not to win, but to imagine a life worth living, a cabin, time to write, time to breathe. But when, the jackpots hit billions, I would freeze because I couldn't dream of anything that big. Because this is what happens. Work erodes imagination. It whispers survival is the only goal. And it's not just personal, it's systemic. And burnout is everywhere. A 2025 study found that 82% of employees are at risk of burnout, marking a dramatic rise. And 2/3 of workers are already burnt out, the highest rates on record. And in the UK, 85% of workers reported symptoms of burnout, with nearly half taking time off for mental health. Globally, mental disorders like depression and anxiety cause 12 million lost working days a year, costing the world economy $1 trillion in productivity lost. In the US, around 76% of employees report burnout, depression, or anxiety symptoms. This isn't individual weakness. This is structural collapse. We're not just tired. We're broken by a system that consumes our lives and leaves us empty. So, what do we do? Well, first, I think that we have to stop waiting for work to save us. Work won't. It was never meant to. We have to stop pouring our best energy into companies that would replace us tomorrow. Instead, we should reclaim that energy for ourselves. Now, for me, it started small. Weekends, late nights, stolen hours, making YouTube videos when no one was watching, taking my drone out during lunch breaks, flying it for 10 minutes over empty fields or city skylines. Those brief flights felt like freedom. I would go back to the office with my virtual tie on, but for the moment I had tasted the sky. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And those small acts snowballed. From tinkering with video editing, to uploading more consistently, to building a channel, to realizing that I don't need to ask for permission to create. I don't need a boss to validate me. I can build something on my own terms. This is the only real way out, to stop believing the lie, to start building something that belongs to you. And it doesn't have to be huge, Stop thinking Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. It doesn't have to be glamorous. Maybe it's just a side hustle. Maybe it's, painting. Maybe it's coding, writing, fixing bikes, cooking, streaming, building a small online store. The point isn't the scale. The point is that it's yours. So let's be real. It isn't easy. You might have debts, you might have mortgages, family responsibilities. These things hold us down. Fear whispers that if we step off the path, everything will collapse. And in a way, that fear isn't wrong because the system is designed to keep us afraid. But the first step is clarity. To say out loud, work will not save me. And that's why I like to use the term wage slavery. I'm not afraid to say that I'm a wage slave. Because once you start to break that spell, you can start seeing possibilities again. Now here's the good news. There are actually cracks in the system. Around the world, there are experiments with a 4-day work week showing that people get just as much done, sometimes more, with feeling healthier and happier. Companies in the UK and Iceland, they ran these trials, and burnout plummeted, productivity held steady, mental health improved. Workers finally had time to live. At the same time, though, more people than ever are choosing to build small, one-person businesses. In the US, millions are now solo entrepreneurs, creating content, freelancing, selling products, offering services. The tools are here. The internet, AI, platforms, communities. For the first time in history, ordinary people like you and me can build something that reaches the world without needing a corporation behind them. I just released a bestseller book on Amazon. That's thanks to you mostly, but the point is, it's possible. And every person who chooses this path chips away at that old story. The system tells you to settle, to grind, to shut down your dreams. But the truth? You don't need to win the lottery. You just need to reclaim your time, your attention, your spark. Now for me, it began with a drone and a camera. For you, it could be something completely different. But whatever it is, make sure it's yours because that makes all the difference. As always, thank you for listening. Do me a favor and tap that like button to show your support. Subscribe if you're interested in more content like this. Until next time, stay hungry, relentless, and strong in your journey of escaping wage slavery. Bye.